We've got a great panel coming up. Our topic is mental health defender programs. And most everyone involved in indigent defense these days recognizes a sizable portion of the defendants coming through the system suffer from some form of mental illness. And very often the conduct that has brought them into the criminal justice system is related to untreated mental illness. So this has led to an increased efforts in a number of jurisdictions to develop specialized defender programs. We'll hear from some of those today that provide enhanced services to help mentally ill defendants stabilize in the community, have better outcomes in general, and to break the cycle of recidivism that often we see with this class of defendants. So let me introduce our panelists. We have William Kelly, who's a professor on my immediate left, who's a professor of sociology at the University of Texas at Austin. He's researched and published extensively on criminal justice issues for over 25 years. To his left, we have Melissa Shear, who's the director of the Travis County Mental Health Public Defender Program, a specialized unit that was created back in 2007. Melissa's been with that program since its inception. She's also a licensed social worker. To Melissa's left, we have Elise Ferguson, who's the chief attorney of the Collin County Mental Health Managed Counsel Program. And Elise is responsible for managing the specially trained attorneys in Collin County who represent indigent defendants diagnosed with mental illness. She also has a background, a master's degree in counseling psychology in addition to her JD, and previously worked in community supervision and with MHMR. So brings together a lot of that into her work today. And on the end, we have Michael Young, who's the Chief Public Defender of Bexar County, which has a trial, appellate, and mental health divisions. And currently, the Bexar County Public Defender is providing representation for mentally ill defendants at the very earliest stages at the magistration hearing to try to advocate for PR bonds where appropriate and to try to divert as many of those folks as possible from jail to treatment. So he will have a few things to tell us about that. So we'll get started with Mr. Kelly, Professor Kelly.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here. I don't think I've spoken before this audience before, but it's always lovely to see smart people to talk to. I guess last week, the four of us, I'm not sure I should say colluded, but we did collaborate on what I would do, which is to basically set the stage for criminal justice, mental health issues, and then these folks would talk to you about what they do day to day in terms of addressing it. So mine's kind of big picture. If I say a few things that you already know, please excuse me, but here's the big picture. As you know, for the past 50 years, we've been fighting a war on crime and drugs with a nearly universal focus on punishment. Our goal has been to try and punish bad behavior out of people. This has been based largely on retribution and deterrence. Retribution being sort of anger-based decision-making. We're going to, an eye for an eye, throw the book at you, throw away the book, and no, that is not going to work either. I shouldn't do metaphors. I nearly always mess them up. We've gone down this road of trying to punish individuals. Obvious question is, what have we accomplished? First of all, we've spent about $1 trillion on tough on crime. We spent another $1 trillion on the war on drugs. More recent evidence shows that the overall cost, both criminal justice as well as the economic and social costs of our policies of the past 50 years has been about $1 trillion a year. What have we accomplished in terms of crime fighting and recidivism reduction? In general, our recidivism rate is about 65%. I don't know about you, but this is not a report card that I want to take home to my mom, because she would not be terribly happy about it. I think one of the issues, obviously, is that the public is not aware of how much this has cost and the relative lack of an obvious and productive benefit. Why the dismal report card? Well, first of all, it's our assumption that we can punish bad behavior out of people. I would hope that everybody in this room has experienced punishment of one form or another from our parents, from teachers. I mean, I've gotten it from everybody: parents, teacher, clergy, neighbors, people I don't even know that would come up to me and like threaten to do something bad because I was behaving poorly. We understand this. It makes sense. This is how we become socialized. This is how we learn social rules. This is how we become civil individuals. That logic makes sense for us, and that is largely the basis for the past 50 years of criminal justice policy. The problem is the logic is flawed because criminal offenders, as you know, differ in fundamentally different ways from us. How? 50% today have a diagnosable mental illness. 80% have a substance use disorder. About 60% of inmates in prisons and jails today have had at least one traumatic brain injury, often leading to a variety of neurocognitive impairments. About 15% have significant intellectual deficits. And then the picture becomes more complex when we appreciate comorbidity or the co-occurrence of disorders. About 75% of everyone in the justice system with one mental illness has multiple mental illnesses. And a very common occurrence is a mental health diagnosis in conjunction with a substance use disorder. This makes not only the intervention and treatment for mental health issues extremely difficult, it also makes intervention for the substance use disorder extremely difficult. It is fundamentally difficult to find anybody in the outside, in the free world, who is willing to address both of those in combination, let alone individuals in the criminal justice system. We know that criminal offending is highest among individuals ages 14 to 25. Who can tell us why? Yes?
Frontal lobe development.
Whoa, what is that?
Frontal lobe is the part of the brain that keeps you in check, that checks your impulses.
Okay. We know from neuroscience, and neuroscience has come on the scene in recent years and informed us tremendously about human behavior in general and criminal behavior in particular. We know that the frontal lobe of the brain is not fully developed until the early to mid-20s. At the same time, we know that kids engage in crime on a fairly constant basis, and the obvious question is why, and we've said for years, bad decision making. Well, you're right about that, but now we know why. The frontal lobe controls a host of activities referred to as executive functioning: planning, decision-making, impulse control, self-monitoring, goal-directed activity, complex cognition. Yeah, it's bad decision-making. But that evidence, on top of the evidence of the prevalence of mental illness and substance use disorders and everything else, goes a long way in our understanding why punishment does not change the behavior of most criminal offenders. We know today from neuroscience evidence that growing up in an environment of poverty, this is independent of the neurodevelopmental effect of being young, but growing up in the environment of poverty can lead up to a 20% reduction in the frontal lobe of the brain. And in many situations, that is permanent. Physical and emotional trauma and environmental toxins. Flint, Michigan, 3 or 4 years ago, had the lead issue in their water. And obviously the experts are predicting in a handful of years we're going to see a spike in crime as a consequence of the impact on the brain development of kids who are exposed to lead. These are nutrition. These are simple things. But taken together, they all help us understand in much greater detail and much more proactive detail what it is we're doing wrong. If we need no other headline than the fact that the recidivism rate for mentally ill offenders is not 65%, it's 80%. That tells us a lot about how well we're addressing the needs, concerns, deficits, criminogenic circumstances of that population. What we have today, and this is not a happy thought, we have created a nearly perfect recidivism machine. If you wanted to draw the blueprint from scratch, I don't know how you could improve on what we have in terms of the American criminal justice system. Lest you think I'm only a critic, one of the questions is, where do we go from here? And very briefly, how much time do I have? 5 minutes remaining. Okay, so do you have any coffee or Diet Coke? I can speed it up here. Here's what we proposed in the most recent book that I wrote with Robert Pittman, who is now a federal district judge, was U.S. attorney here, and Bill Strusand, who was a child and adolescent psychiatrist. is we propose getting more expertise into the process of determining what are the circumstances, deficits, disorders, et cetera, of everybody who walks into the criminal justice system. Do not rely on probation to do this. Do not rely on other criminal justice folks to do this. We need professionals, not only in the assessment and screening process, but in the treatment plan development and intervention. We need to focus less on diagnosis and more on dysfunction. What is it about this person's condition that impacts their behavior? We don't care what the label is that managed care places on this. That's what the DSM does. These are useful categories, largely for managed care, but also for some caregivers. But the point is, how is this impacting someone's behavior? What are the dysfunctions that they're exhibiting? And that should inform how we go about treating individuals. We're really advocating rebalancing. Do not close prisons. We need prisons. We need prisons to be able to separate people who are dangerous, who cannot be trusted in the community. But we need to also understand in much greater detail who belongs there and who doesn't. What motivated this most recent book was a conversation I had with Robert Pittman probably 5 years ago when he was a magistrate, and he says, the hardest thing I do is sorting people into the right categories. I don't really know who belongs where. He said, I'm a lawyer. How am I supposed to know? Other than perhaps some amount of punishment is appropriate. I know every day I do this, but at the same time, I know that the outcome is pretty predictable, and it is not something that we would be terribly proud of. As you might have guessed, prosecutors are key to this whole big picture. Prosecutors are the most important people in the criminal justice system, as you know. They are judge, jury, and sentencer in the vast majority of all situations. Because, as you know, the vast majority of all cases are plea negotiated, so they never see their day in court. They never go before a tribunal, before a judge. The prosecutor makes all the key decisions. So what we need to do is to provide the resources to prosecutors so they can make better, more informed decisions. Evidence provided by experts who are independent, who simply make recommendations and then can make the same recommendations to judges at the same time. And, because I know what you're all thinking now, this is lovely, but we certainly can't do that the way things are. And you're right, because one of the biggest culprits in this whole big picture is public health. The reason that there are so many mentally disordered individuals in the criminal justice system is because we don't have public health resources for folks to seek treatment on the outside. Criminal justice reform is not just about reforming the criminal justice system. It's about reforming public education. It's about providing affordable housing, but most importantly, it's about getting serious about public health. If I was in that situation, I'd move to Massachusetts, because the odds of my getting help are much better there than they are here in terms of what is available, in terms of resources. Don't get me going. I know we're in the capital. But we got to quit dumping the people we don't know what else to do with in the criminal justice system. And it's time we quit accepting this, easy for me to say, and start implementing real change. And I will close, because I have 2 minutes. This is not even a 2-minute comment. Crime is local, and so are its solutions. The legislature or Congress should not be involved in what I'm talking about. This is local initiative. This is Travis County sitting down, county commissioners, the DA, some judges, police department, and say, we need to reinvent our criminal justice system. And then every county after that. We need to develop prototypes where we consider the circumstances of that particular county, what their resources are that are available, seek resources elsewhere. Until we do that, we're going to keep adding lubrication to the revolving door, which is the situation we're in now. Thank you.